Hello, this is Power in the Word, and I'm Scott Reed. Thanks for joining me for this particular study session in our Old Testament, Come Follow Me. Today, as we look at Abraham 1 and 2 and Genesis 14 through 17, and establish Abraham as our new dispensation leader and his covenant known as the Abrahamic covenant or the new and everlasting covenant. There is a lot to cover, and we're all over the place today, so I hope that you're able to follow. Jumping in to our Pearl of Great Price, first we look at Abraham 1. Here we begin Abraham's life, who lives in Ur of Chaldees. He states in verse 2 that finding there was greater happiness and peace and rest for me, I sought for the blessings of the fathers and the right whereunto I should be ordained to administer the same, having been myself a follower of righteousness, and desiring also to be one who possesses great knowledge and to be a greater follower of righteousness, and to possess a greater knowledge and to be a father of many nations, a prince of peace, and desiring to receive instructions and to keep the commandments of God, I became a rightful heir, a high priest, holding the right belonging to the fathers. Now note it talks about the right or the blessing of the fathers there. That blessing is that righteous men have held the priesthood of God and have passed it down through that patriarchal line of Adam to Noah. And noting that he desires to be now a follower of righteousness is an interesting idea, because he will get that priesthood through Melchizedek, who, as we know from Hebrews 7, 1 and 2, his name is defined as King of Righteousness. So being a follower of righteousness may well have a dual meaning to it. For Abraham here desires all the blessings of the gospel to make him, and those are three great words to underline on that top line, more happy, with greater peace, and having greater rest for him and his family. Note he states in verse 3, and it, speaking the priesthood, was conferred upon me from the fathers, and this priesthood had come down from the fathers from the beginning of time, yea, even from the beginning or before the foundation of the earth, helping us understand that the priesthood is an everlasting principle and exists with God from eternity and will to eternity without beginning of days or end of years. Joseph Smith states, it is the channel through which all knowledge, doctrine, the plan of salvation, and every important matter is revealed from heaven. We continue here, and verse 3 then states that right of the firstborn, or of the first man, or of the first father, all titles for Adam. You might want to take a moment, underline each one of them, for all of them are important and significant. A couple of things. Joseph F. Smith stated, under the patriarchal order, the right or the inheritance of the firstborn is known as birthright, which is what we generally refer to it as. This generally included a land inheritance as well as the authority to preside. The patriarchs who held the birthright were those who also held the keys of the priesthood, the right of presidency, or the directing power. Note then that Adam holds the right of the firstborn. Adam, as the firstborn, possessing the right of the firstborn, but due to transgression in the garden, loses his appointed position to the next righteous born son, you know him as Jesus Christ, of the Father, who then will gain the inheritance or heir and the double portion of his father in order to carry out his righteous responsibilities concerning the rest of the family. Hence, every scriptural story that we are familiar with, from Cain and Abel to Japheth and Shem, to Esau and Jacob, to Reuben and Joseph, to Manasseh and Ephraim, to Laman and Nephi. We all have these multiple stories in our scriptures declaring that the birthright order is simply a type and shadow of the original story, a testament of Christ and his righteousness. So each one of those, as you see, a younger brother inherit a birthright from an older brother. You're once again looking at this repeated pattern in scriptures teaching us about Jesus Christ. Adam as the firstborn also denotes that he had to be born. You can't be a firstborn if you're not born. If he was created in some other fashion, it would be he was the first hatched or the first rolled together out of dust. But that's not what it states. Adam as the first man declares the fact that he is the first to enter mortality, and therefore Adam is the first father or the original progenitor of all the human race. So those titles are key to our understanding of priesthood and Adam. Note this further insight given by Joseph Smith to others and recorded by them. In the first place, the name of the man is given a new name, Adam, signifying the first man, or Eve, the first woman. Adam's name was more ancient than he was. It was the name of a man long before him who enjoyed the priesthood. The new name should be after some ancient man. Thus, with your ancient name, your modern name, and the name that was last given to you, you inquire concerning things past, present, and future. After his fall, another name is given then to Adam, according to these good men who recorded things that were taught them by the prophet Joseph Smith, our dispensation leader. Thought you might want to know that insight. Continuing, it states, verse 4, that Abraham sought mine appointment with the priesthood according to the appointment of God unto the fathers concerning the seed. My fathers, having turned from their righteousness, including his own father, and they will pick up and worship the gods of the heathens. Verse 6, their hearts were set to do evil and were wholly turned to the god of Elkanah, Libnah, Machorah, Korash, the gods of Pharaoh, who is the king of Egypt. We're going to get a little bit more on him in a minute. Therefore, they turned their hearts to the sacrifice of the heathens in offering up their children unto dumb idols, and hearken not unto my voice, but endeavored to take away my life by the hand of the priest of Elkanah, who was the priest of Pharaoh. And so we see a picture of that very thing, of Abraham is laying on the Egyptian couch or altar and being offered by that apostate priest, and will need to be saved as he prays to the Lord and has an angel of God appear to save him. Okay, coming back, we see a little bit more when we look at verse 15. As they lifted up their hands upon me that they might offer me up and take away my life, behold, I lifted up my voice unto the Lord God. And note, the angel of his presence stood by me and immediately loosed my bounds. Now, he identifies who he is in verse 16 when he says, Abraham, Abraham, behold, my name is Jehovah. So even though we see him in the form of a dove or a bird coming down, we see that it is Jehovah in his pre-mortal state that actually saves him. An interesting note from Facsimile 1 that I just showed you is that Abraham, in the act of lifting up his voice, also lifted up his hands. Notice both hands are upraised in holy prayer. That's an interesting note, especially when it concerns the temple. As we also now see, he will be released from this apostate priest of Pharaoh. And then we have an insight, almost a flashback to say, let me tell you about pharaohs of Egypt. Coming down to verse 21 through 27, you might want to be sure you darken these verses. They are insightful. There's nothing like them in the Bible. Verse 21 states that this king of Egypt was a descendant from the loins of Ham. So that's where we get the Egyptians, is from Ham's line. And from this descent spring all the Egyptians, and the blood of the Canaanites is preserved in the land. We know that the land of Egypt is first discovered by a woman who is the daughter of Ham. And Ham had married one named Egyptus, which in the Chaldean language means forbidden. So good note that Ham and his wife Egyptus have a daughter by the name of Egyptus, who has a son by the name of Pharaoh. And this first government of Egypt was established by Pharaoh, the eldest son of Egyptus, the daughter of Ham. And it was after the manner of the government of Ham, which was patriarchal. For, incredible verse, Pharaoh being a righteous man. So this Pharaoh, he's not wicked. He's righteous. And he desires to establish his kingdom and judge his people wisely and justly all his days, but seeks earnestly then to imitate that order. Section 107, 1 through 4. Order is the original name of the priesthood of God, meaning he doesn't hold it, but he understands and knows that it is necessary to have in order to deal justly and establish a kingdom of righteousness. I would be sure you darken underline, circle, whatever else you can, the word imitate. For it is Satan's influence and his constant imitation in both the things relating to things on earth and heaven that we see now carry out through time. We're going to see Egypt over and over imitate. It's coming up even more in a couple of lessons with Moses and Ramses. Imitation of this priesthood and authority that started with the first Pharaoh, even though he's a righteous, good man, has to imitate. And you might ask yourself, well, doesn't Pharaoh hold the priesthood? No, he does not. Verse 27, Pharaoh, being of that lineage by which he could not have the right of the priesthood, notwithstanding the pharaohs would fain claim it from Noah, who gives him his blessing, not authority. Through Ham, therefore, my father was led away by their idolatry. So even Abraham's father holds to this. Here's an interesting story told multiple times in conference by President John Taylor you might want to be aware of. It is said that Abraham's father was an idolater and that he had a number of gods in his house. This grieved Abraham, whilst his father wanted his son to believe and worship as he himself did. But Abraham knew better than to do such a thing. Abraham at last thought he would teach his father a lesson by making it a clean sweep of his gods. So he got a club or some other weapon and knocked off the heads of some of the gods, their arms and their legs, and made a general wreck among the idols, but left the biggest idol untouched. When Abraham's father learned what had happened, of course, he was greatly exercised, and he inquired of Abraham, "Who has done this?" Abraham told him that the gods had had a quarrel among themselves, and he said, "That guy, he." Here's the fellow, pointing to the big one he had spared. "He did it." Said the father, "My son, why do you tell me such things? My gods cannot fight. They have legs, but they cannot walk. They have arms, but they cannot use them. They have eyes and ears, but they cannot see nor hear." "Why, father," said Abraham, "is it possible that you worship a God that cannot hear or see or walk or use himself at all?" Ouch. Abraham just gave his father a spiritual spanking, as Habakkuk 2:18 and 19 and 20 talk about the dumb idols of the world, meaning they cannot speak, but they certainly are exactly that, dumb. We come down then as his father then repented, verse 30. Oh, see, good humble man understands and repents of the evil which he had determined against me to take away my life. And we learned that it was he that gave Pharaoh Abraham to be a sacrifice to these altars. And then this verse, you may want to darken it. It is part of the Abrahamic covenant we'll talk about later. Verse 31. But the records of the fathers, even the patriarchs, concerning the right of the priesthood, the Lord my God preserved in my own hands, therefore a knowledge of the beginning of the creation, and also of the planets and of the stars, as they were made known unto the fathers, have I kept even unto this day. And I have endeavored to write some of these things upon this record, for the benefit of my posterity that shall come after me. Okay? Abraham becomes a record keeper for his posterity, part of the Abrahamic covenant. And so be sure that you darken that. Now, we go then over to our next chapter in Abraham 2. Let's just pick it up. We'll come later on and finish this. But verse 15 states that he's going to now move from Ur of Chaldea. See here in 15? He's going to move up north to Haran. He will then come down south on the other side of the Jordan River through Jershon, then to Shechem, then verse 20 to Bethel. Notice the words. Beth is house and El is short for Elohim, and house of God is how it is translated. He will then come to Egypt. Now, Ur was ruled by Egypt at the time, the Chaldean area, but he's come up and around and is in actual Egypt now and encounters an experience with the Pharaoh himself. It states in verse 22, it came to pass when I was come near to enter into Egypt, the Lord said unto me, Behold, Sarai, thy wife, she is very fair to look upon. She's beautiful. Therefore it shall come to pass that when the Egyptians shall see her, they will say, She is his wife, and they will kill you, but they will save her alive. Therefore see that you do on this wise. Let her say unto the Egyptians, Well, I'm his sister, to save thy soul. And it came to pass that Abraham told Sarai, his wife, all the things the Lord had said to him. Therefore say unto them, I pray thee, thou art my sister, that it might be well with me for thy sake, and my soul shall live because of thee. Understanding this custom or tradition then is necessary. Egyptian pharaohs had a strong aversion to committing adultery with another man's wife. They had no qualms about murdering the man to free his spouse from remarriage. To kill the husband in order to possess himself of his wife seems to have been a common royal custom in those days. A papyrus tells us of a pharaoh who, acting on the advice of one of his princes, sent armed men to fetch a beautiful woman and make away with her husband. So, out of our Institute manual, we read, Abraham could validly state that Sarah was his sister. In the Bible, the Hebrew word brother or sister are often used for another blood relative, in which Lot, Abraham's nephew, is called his brother. Because Abraham and Haran, Sarah's father, were brothers, Sarah was Abraham's niece, and thus could be called sister. Also, it is not unlikely that when Haran died, Terah legally adopted Haran's children as his own, thus making Sarah Abraham's sister. So, understanding those two customs or traditions, we do not have Abraham lying or having the Lord tell Abraham to tell an untruth, but understanding the common traditions or customs, not spinning our own time on their event, we see a much different picture. We have to be sure we don't put in presentism or move places and times on us and imply them on them. So there's some help for you concerning those things. Now, let's go then to our Genesis account and see what it actually says, because we come to Genesis 12:16, and he entreated Abram well for her sake, and he had sheep and oxen and asses and manservant and maidservants and she-asses and camels, and the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And the Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this that thou hast done unto me? Why didst thou not tell me that she was thy wife? Why sayest thou, she is my sister? So I might have taken her to me to wife. Now therefore, behold thy wife, take her and go thy way." And Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away and his wife and all that they had. This story then that comes out of the Genesis Apocryphon found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in which Abraham heals the ailing Pharaoh by laying his hands upon his head and blesses him after the Lord had plagued him. That ordinance marks both the end of the king's attempt to raise up a royal line by Sarah and the acknowledgement of Abraham's true relationship to Sarah, the queen. Okay, so helping us understand some of these things that are going on. We move to Genesis then, chapter 14. Another character appears in the scriptures in which we need to be aware of. Here in verse 18 and 19, we have only a small snippet here of which all, other than maybe a few verses from Paul, we don't have anything upon this character named Melchizedek, who we see here is the king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest. Notice, not a priest. He is the priest, suggesting the great high priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him, as we understand, with the priesthood of God. Now, we may want to be sure you're aware that here in the JST account, we have much more restored by the prophet Joseph Smith concerning Melchizedek. Now, as we come to the JST Genesis account, or the Joseph Smith translation, which you need to go to your study helps if you're doing this electronically, and look under JST Genesis to find chapter 14. If you're hard copy, you'll have to go to the very back to the appendix. These are JSTs, but they can't go in the footnote because they are too lengthy, and so they put them in the appendix. Now, coming to this particular JST, we see verse 30, that this was sworn of God to Enoch, that his seed with an oath by himself, that everyone being ordained after this order, Melchizedek, priesthood, and called should have power by faith too. And then he look at all the things that they are able to accomplish and do with the power and authority of God exercised with faith. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. A complete number of things that are then listed for us. Verse 33, and Melchizedek, being a priest of this particular order, he is the king of Salem and is called the Prince of Peace. Salem, remember, is peace, and so he's a Prince of Peace. and that his people wrought righteousness and obtained heaven, much like Enoch and his city did. So we're looking at Melchizedek as a translated being. Now, one note, who is this Melchizedek? Well, I've given you this slide that might help answer that. In an article right out of the Ensign, November 1973, the question is asked, is it possible that Shem, Noah's son, and Melchizedek are the same person? Coming down, you can see 6 things underlined in this article that suggest they are exactly the same person. And we see that several prophets of the latter day have taught this as a correct concept. It was taught first by Joseph Smith and here by Joseph F. Smith. Now, note here at the bottom, many persons believe because of section 84:14 that it is proof that there are perhaps several generations between Melchizedek and Noah, but the scriptures say, which Abraham received the priesthood from Melchizedek, who received it through the lineage of his fathers, plural, even till Noah. If it does turn out that Shem and Melchizedek are the same person, this scripture should prove no stumbling block because it could be interpreted to mean that priesthood authority commenced with Adam and came through the fathers even till Noah, and then to Shem or Melchizedek. So we see here the possibility of another city being translated with the translation of Melchizedek or Shem, also the translation of his father with them, Noah or Gabriel. Bringing you to Alma chapter 13, we see in verses 14 through 20, and verses I would have you darken in your scriptures, some insight nowhere else given concerning this Melchizedek, who, verse 14, is a high priest in this same order known as the Melchizedek order of priesthood, that he is 16, darken a type of his order. Yes, he is a type and shadow for Jesus Christ. And I've underlined many of them here for you. For example, 17. Melchizedek is a king over the land of Salem, the exact same place that Jesus Christ is the king of the Jews over. Jerusalem. We'll have that switch of name and its meaning when we look at Genesis 22 next week. We see that his people wax strong in iniquity and abomination, yet all of them had gone astray. All were full of the manner of wickedness. 18, but Melchizedek exercises mighty faith, using this priesthood to preach repentance unto his people, becoming the Prince of Peace, or the King of Salem. And he did reign under his father. Concerning him, verse 19, none were greater. Yeah, did you catch many of those? On this particular slide, then, I've given you all the different types and shadows that I have found through the years concerning this Melchizedek, a great high priest. Note, just pause for a minute. You might want to underline many of them in your scriptures, as that's one of our great things from the Old Testament that we're supposed to pick up. Okay, let's move from Melchizedek back to our scriptures. And here we pick up Abram, commanded by the Lord to do the following. Now, this is a very bizarre thing. You'll need to be sure you walk through it with me carefully. He tells him, I want you to take a heifer or cow of 3 years old, a she-goat 3 years old, a ram 3 years old, and turtle dove and a young pigeon, all considered under the law to be clean animals. And I want you to, verse 10, divide them in the midst and lay each piece one against another. But the birds, no, don't divide them. They're too small. Don't cut them in half. Okay? Now, you might ask yourself, what on earth is going on here? Does your picture in your mind look like this? Okay, you see the heifer now cleaved in half and each piece placed against its other piece. They're divided. Okay, and the goat lay in here, one piece here and one piece here. A ram, both pieces, and the young pigeon and the dove, not divided, but sacrificed. Notice there are 8 pieces now, as he has established this line or pathway down between all the pieces that have been cleaved or cut or sacrificed. 8 is the number for covenants in Scripture. We'll find it all over the place. Example, in our own day, 8 is the time in which we enter into our first covenant, that of baptism. So here are the 8 pieces of animal, and he's established a path, or you call it the gospel path, the path that we establish in covenant making. So, coming back to our scriptures, we see verse 11, after dividing all these animals, the fowl or the birds come to feed upon their carcasses. But Abram drives them away, demonstrating his diligence in keeping his covenants. And verse 12 states, and when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and, get excited, a horror of great darkness fell upon him. An indication here of a nightmare, or the dark part of this story, we might say the opposition was present. He seems like he always appears when good things are about to happen or have just happened to test. The prophets are part of that as well. Verse 13, and he says unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed, Abram, will be a stronger in a land than is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. Note, seed here suggests a promise of posterity, despite the inability for him and his wife to have seed. She is barren and they can't have children. Note that the strange land mentioned here in verse 13 by the Lord is Egypt, and that the posterity of Abraham will serve the Egyptians for 400 years. But the promise is that they will then be delivered. Interesting thing in this covenantal process of him, and we see now God actually pass down the path or cut, right? The Hebrew word for the covenant making process is karath berith, to cut a covenant or to pass through the path which Abram has made. And here it is, verse 17. It came to pass that when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces. We actually see the presence of the Lord mentioned much like he does on Mount Sinai with smoke and fire, or just his presence. And 18, that same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram. So understanding that Abraham now has made a covenant, has shown that he will be obedient and sacrifice, and he will drive away the birds, he now will be worthy of gaining further light and knowledge. Coming then to the chapter of the Abrahamic covenant, Genesis chapter 17. We then link 15 and 17 together as that covenant. The first part is the law of obedience and sacrifice, and the law of the gospel, of marriage, and of posterity will be finished here in the 17th chapter. In your heading, I would be sure to underline it all. It gives some great insights. Abram is 90 years old in verse 1. That's an important detail. He walks before God, and Abraham falls on his face, and God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee. You might want to go through and underline that word all the way through here, covenant. And thou shalt be a father of many nations. Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but he receives a new name. Now, this is good temple language. That is Abram to Abraham. Note the difference. Abraham is father of a multitude versus Abram, which is exalted father. Exalted father suggests he himself will be exalted. But father of a multitude suggests that there will be lots of seed also in this exalted position. That's good note. And he states here, a father of many nations have I made thee. That's present tense, not future tense. That's a good catch to make, is that he's already considered the father of many nations, present tense. He states in verse 6, I will make thee exceedingly fruitful. I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. I will establish my, there's that word, covenant between me and thee and thy seed after thee and their generation for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee and to thy seed after thee. There is the condition. You must make me your God. If you do, I will give you everlasting blessings. I will give unto thee seed. I will give unto thee land. I will give unto thee an everlasting possession. And God says unto Abraham, Thou shalt keep my covenant. Therefore, thou and thy seed after thee in their generations. This is my covenant. It involves seed. But every child that thou hast, you must circumcise. Then this, it shall, notice this circumcision, be a token of the covenant between me and you must do it on the 8th day of their birth. So notice the great symbol, a token of entering into the Abrahamic covenant, or we say the gospel, through a covenant-making process at 8. Before we leave there, you need to be sure that there was additional insight taught. Here in JST Genesis 17:7a, you can go to your footnote, look at it. You'll have to go to your appendix to look at it all, or to your study helps as we did in the Genesis 14. Notice this insight from Joseph Smith, helping clarify and give us additional verses that have been removed. He states, verse 9, This covenant I make, that thy children may be known among all nations. Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but called Abraham. For a father of many nations have I made thee. I will make thee exceedingly fruitful. I will make nations of thee. Kings shall come, and of thy seed. It's an important note. Verse 11. I will establish a covenant of circumcision with thee. It shall be a covenant between me and thee and thy seed after thee in their generations. Then darken, that thou mayest know forever that children are not accountable before me until they are 8 years old. Oh, that's incredible insight from the prophet, helping us draw that conclusion that the token of circumcision at the covenant-making beginning process of baptism, 8 days, really was trying to teach us of the accountability of children starts at 8 years old. If the rest of Christianity had that verse, just that one verse, that has been removed as a plain and precious truth, we wouldn't have the baptism of little children, nor the idea that little children can sin and have accountability until 8 years old, as declared in the Doctrine and Covenants, section 68, 25 through 30. Be sure that you get that reference. Okay, so coming back to our regular Genesis 17 account, we come down to verse 13. It states, He that is born in thy house and he that is bought with money then needs circumcision as part of this everlasting covenant. And the uncircumcised man-child, whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that so shall be cut off. So there's that idea of cutting covenants again. Is that karath berith, or that idea of cutting a covenant with God. Your circumcision, or the cutting of the foreskin then, and throwing that thing which is of no use, symbol of the natural man in us, okay, as a token then of cutting in the covenant. But if you break it, then you are cut off from that covenant. Important wording. And Abraham says, not only are we going to change your name, but your wife will receive a new name too. As for Sarai, her name is changed to Sarah. Now, interesting little note, just a small tweak, where Sarai means to act as princess. Sarah in Hebrew means princess. Do you see the small little tweak? The same thing with Abram. Abraham to Abraham. Sarai to Sarah. A little tweak and a new name given that demonstrates the covenant in their lives. Okay, and we will look at that covenantal fulfillment as we see Sarah as a barren woman miraculously bear a child next week. Okay, that concludes Genesis 17, and we have one more thing to look at. Come with me back to the Pearl of Great Price then. We see here in verses 6 through 11 a better or more clear picture of all the points concerning this covenantal binding between Abraham, his seed, and the God of heaven. Let's look carefully. As we noted earlier, the last verse of Abraham 1 was part of that. A record keeper. Then we come to verse 6 in chapter 2. Abraham now, and Lot, my brother's son, prayed unto the Lord, and the Lord appeared unto me and said unto me, Arise and take Lot with thee, for I have purposed to take thee away out of Haran, and to make of thee a minister to bear my name in a strange land, Egypt. So he's going to be one that is bearing witness, of the name of Christ, or this unknown God, to Pharaoh and his descent, which, he states, I will also give thee an everlasting possession. Better underline it. That suggests a land everlastingly given to Abraham's seed. Condition, you must hearken to my voice. I must be your God and the only God in whom you worship. Period. My name, verse 8, is Jehovah. I know the end from the beginning, therefore my hand shall be over thee. If he knows the end from the beginning, he can then declare things in the present tense, like Abraham having seed. Something for Abraham and Sarah will be future. Verse 9, I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee above measure, and make thy name great among all nations. Thou shalt be a blessing unto thy seed after thee, and in their hands they shall bear this ministry and priesthood unto all nations. Interesting. We now see that idea of a priesthood. The very beginning of our lesson, we saw that Abraham sought is to gain this priesthood, to bless him and his posterity from Melchizedek. And he having then this priesthood must go and minister as a missionary then unto all nations. Responsibility. stewardship. Verse 10, I will bless them through thy name. For as many as receive this gospel. So he is the bringer of the gospel, shall be called then after thy name. So yes, many times we call this the new and everlasting covenant, or the gospel covenant. But note that God declared that the gospel must be declared after his name. It is the Abrahamic covenant. And it entails all of those covenants that you and I know in the gospel today. And you shall be accounted seed of Abraham, being called by his name, and shall raise up and bless then Abraham as the great father of the gospel. Note verse 11. I will bless them that bless thee. I will curse them that will curse thee. And in thee, that is in thy priesthood, and in thy seed, that is thy priesthood, for I give unto thee a promise, that this right shall continue in thee and in thy seed after thee, and that is to say, the literal seed, or the seed of the body, shall all the blessings of the earth be blessed, even with the blessings of the gospel, there that idea again, which are the blessings of salvation, even life eternal. So note this last one. He not only allows others to be brought into the gospel covenant and to become the seed of Abraham, but he states that the literal seed, or the seed of Abraham himself, will be the one that blesses all. Notice all the families of the earth with the gospel and salvation. What's he trying to say in verse 11? He is declaring that it is through Abraham's line the Son of God will come, that he will have the blessing of having Jesus Christ come through his lineage. What an incredible blessing and covenant to be a part of Abraham and his family. In summary, I would take you then to this slide that might help us see an overview. Involved in the Abrahamic covenant, then, we see Genesis 15, 17, and Abraham specifically, verses 6 through 11 of chapter 2. We see the covenantal process of cutting or tearing or rending a covenant with the God of heaven and its 5 points of binding. We see, 1, that as a covenant maker in Abraham's covenant, we must be a preserver of records. That includes our own record, so that we keep journals as well as record of ordinances and events that happen throughout the church. Second, it involves the possession of a land inheritance in the next life, or you and I would call it to have the earth become our celestial kingdom. Number 3, it must entail the blessings of the priesthood of God that have been from the days of Adam and even before. It is interesting, Elder Faust said, that the Lord used the word seed in his promise to Abraham. It has a fuller meaning than posterity because it means to multiply the blessings of the covenant of Abraham unto all nations. 4, that this covenant involves salvation. And number 5, to have eternal posterity, including the blessing of having the Son of God in your lineage. Notice there is a covenantal condition. We must hearken to the voice of God. And there is a sign and a token. As mentioned, that of circumcision at 8 days old, being a similitude of the baptismal covenant at 8 years old. And the new names of Abram or Abraham and Sarai to Sarah. And the involvement of receiving then a new name as we become Abraham's seed or the disciples of Christ. So you can see that there are some incredible symbols and similitudes pointing to the covenant-making process both at baptism and also alluding to those same things deepened as we approach temple covenants. Well, this has been enjoyable. I hope that you have seen and learned a little bit more about Abraham, his blessing and posterity established thousands of years ago that flow down through time, even into our lives. I find a study of the scriptures to be powerful and hope that you have felt that power in the word today as we've looked at Abraham and the establishment of the Abrahamic covenant. We see more of that fulfillment next week, as I mentioned, as we look at Isaac. Hope you'll join me again. Till then.